Welcome back for another episode of Strive for 25. Joel Farrell here, and looking forward to sharing with you our guest today.
Welcome to another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast. Joel Farrell here, and I've got an amazing guest up north, across the border in Montreal, Brenden Kumarasamy, entrepreneur and owner and operator of MasterTalk. And Brenden, thanks again for having some time for us today.
Joel, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
So we got connected through some mutual contacts, and I'm just looking forward to this talk because you're in your mid-20s and you're just killing it out there, helping and coaching C-level executives and all that stuff. So can you share with our listeners a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get back into how you got there.
Yeah, for sure. So what I do is I do two things, Joel. I create YouTube videos and social media content so that the whole world can master the art of communication, public speaking. I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a coach like me. So that's part of the mission, which is how do we create these resources? That's how I started MasterTalk. And the other piece of MasterTalk is the coaching business, where I train a lot of C-level executives, entrepreneurs, coaches on how to become top 1% communicators in their industry.
Okay. So the type of client, right, that you're with right now, that is C-level, that's coming to you like, hey, I want to be able to master being able to get in front of a boardroom or get in front of an audience and speak, who may not be naturally inclined or God-given talented to do that. So you're going to help them, with that process and give them the comfort and minimize anxiety, all these things, right?
You got it.
I want to get into that in a little bit. Where did you start? Who was your first coaching client?
Right. I mean,
what type of person?
Sure. So let's start at the beginning, Joel,
Love it.
which is I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. That was never the goal. MasterTalk kind of fell accidentally for me, where I went to business school for literally the opposite of what I do today, which is accounting. That's what I studied. I wanted to be in a partner at an accounting firm. I wanted to be a consultant. Like, I didn't want to be a business owner. I thought I was really allergic to business because I don't have a successful entrepreneur in the family. I'm actually the first one. And I'm also the first one to finish with a college degree. So I saw education as the way out because my parents immigrated from Sri Lanka in the early 90s. So I was focused on just getting a job. That was my dream. But then what happened was when I was in college, I started competing in these things called case competitions, Joel. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing football or basketball, I was one of those guys. I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I coached a lot of those students. So my first clients weren't really clients. I didn't even know you get paid to be a coach until I was probably 4 years into coaching, literally. So I was coaching a lot of the students so that they would win competitions because I was really competitive. And I accidentally developed a skill on how to coach people on communication. And then I started working. I got a regular job. I got a great job at IBM. I was a consultant there for many years. But I had the idea for the YouTube channel Master Talk because I felt that a lot of the information wasn't really available for free on the internet on com. So it didn't even start as a business. I was just making videos for fun. And somebody convinced me that it was a business later down the line.
Okay. So you're working at Mastermind and then at the same time building this YouTube channel up. And how long ago was that?
So I started Master Talk in January 2019, and I started coaching people in general, mostly for free back then, probably in January 2016.
January 2016?
Yeah, so I started coaching January 2016. I started the YouTube channel January 19.
Okay, so I'm gonna just stick on the YouTube for a second. So how often were you contributing to your channel in the first year?
Yeah, so let me paint the picture for the first year. The first year was I'm in my mother's basement. I take out a phone. I have no money, no budget because I hadn't started working yet, so I didn't have any money. And I would just post once a week, and it was the shittiest videos, and they're still up there. All my videos are still up there. People can go see them. So I'm literally just like this. Hi guys, Master Talk, and the reason I had the naivete to think that I could make good videos was just because I was watching what everyone else is doing in my space, and I was like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, because I was listening to what they were saying, and I was like, well, I coached that 17-year-old kid last week on how to speak, And that's not how you do it because that doesn't work for X and Y reason. So even if they had PhDs in the field, I just found so many holes in their logic because they don't coach clients. So I just felt that my nonsensical approach would actually work. So I just started making videos. That's it.
So one a week from your parents' basement.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, what was your thought process at that time? Hey, I know that I can add value. I know that I can help that next person be able to get better at what they're doing. And, you know, at what point in time did you start really seeing the next set of momentum in your craft?
For sure, man. So the first set was really around the people in my case competition program. So my thought at the time was, okay, I'm going to be working at IBM, and most of the week I won't even be in the same city because I have to travel a lot when you work as a consultant. So I won't even have time to coach the future years of this program. So I was like, might as well make videos for them. So I'd literally go to those students. I'd coach like 60 people one-on-one because I just loved it. I just love coaching. I just never knew you could build a career out of it. So I went back to those 60 people and friends of mine from that program. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel and speaking. And they all looked at me and said, yeah, I think that makes sense. I think you should definitely do that. And I said, okay, cool. So that was my audience. They were all like 20-year-old kids like me. I started the channel when I was 22. I started coaching when I was 19 for context. And then I just asked them, okay, guys, what questions do you have on communication? And I would just write down all of their questions, Joel. So one of them would go, how do you present in a second language? And by the way, I don't know the answer to any of these questions. So they're just writing them. And then I start spending an hour a day answering them in a Word document, and that's what becomes the video. So that's the first set. The second momentum where I got a lot of wind in my back was 9 months into MasterTalk. So this is September 2019. I'm 9 months into my corporate job. That changes my life. I'm starting to pay off all my family debt that we accumulated over decades. And I was just like, yeah, I'm definitely going to stay in corporate. I have no intention of going full time. And then I met my business partner in Columbus, Ohio at Summit of Greatness, which is Lewis Howes' event. And he's the one who became my business partner and convinced me I could build a business off of this.
That's awesome. So getting yourself out of your comfort zone, getting out there, meeting people, going to events with like-minded people. Before we go too far onto kind of the business and the evolution of the business, I think it's important to kind of dig a little bit deeper on kind of where this all started again. You mentioned competitions for nerds, right? So you were focusing on a craft that was not kicking a soccer ball or dribbling a basketball. How did you even get into that niche? What was the first, turning point of, hey, I'm going to try this out at whatever age, 15, 12, I don't know what it was. So share about that for a little bit.
For sure. And that was an accident too, Joel. That's why I always believe, I know we're going to get into this later in the show about how do we bring clarity to people who are looking for their next step, is passions don't matter. I really believe that. Unless you know what the passion is, unless you're clear. But the answer is, the truth is most people don't know what it is versus prioritizing decisions. So let's backtrack a little bit. So I'm 19, first semester of business school. I have no network. My parents are factory workers. I thought PricewaterhouseCoopers, the accounting firm, was a water bottling company. I went to their first information session in sweatpants. Okay, literally at zero. The only thing I had going for me was I was a straight A student. That's it. But I didn't know anything else. I didn't know how to get a job. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know how to do any of this. So I went to these information sessions, and somebody told me I needed to network. So I was like, okay. So how do I network? And they go, you got to go to these networking cocktails that student associations, let's say for accounting, run. And I wanted a job. Somebody told me working at the big four accounting firms was going to change my life. You got to work at KPMG. You got to work at EY, Deloitte. I was like, what is this stuff? So I go to the networking cocktail, and by the way, an oversized suit that I got from Sears, that is now a bankrupt company, for $100 from prom because we couldn't afford anything better. Right? My parents are factory workers once again. So I go to this event, and I'm 19, and I meet 22-year-olds who have jobs at PwC, EY, KPMG. They were like my God. And I looked at them and I say, how did you get this job? And they all looked at me and they said, case competition. And then I was like, what's a case competition? And basically what this is, Joel, is a lot of companies use it as a recruiting tool. So let's say an Amazon, an IBM, an Ernst & Young, they'll spend $15,000, $20,000 to sponsor a competition, give, let's say me and you're on the same team, they'll give us a 20-page document. They'll say, okay, this is a problem we have in the business, solve it for us, and present it back to us in 3 hours. So we'd come together, put a bunch of slides together, financials, do this, and then present it back. But the executives know, Joel, that you want to have the right answer. What they're really looking for is who's keen. And whoever's good, they recruit into their companies. That's why I started doing case competence. I wanted a job, nothing more.
It's interesting. So the very first one, how did it go?
Surprisingly, it went really well and really bad all at the same time. So I'll explain what that is. So the first case was by a packaging company. So take Oasis or Tropicana, those bottles, like who packages those bottles? That was the company essentially. And the problem that you had to solve in the case was, coffee cream, right? We put coffee cream from Starbucks or like a Second Cup or a store or Dunkin' Donuts, and we put that in our coffee. But in the United States or in Canada, often that cream is cold. But in Europe, that's not the case. In Europe, it's warm. So you don't have to put it in refrigerators. So you save money on refrigeration costs. Anyways, to make a long story short, we had to sell European cream in the Canadian market. So it's a really tough sell. And what we did to differentiate ourselves, because we were up against like MBAs and we were all kids, and I still had that prom suit on, by the way, so I looked like a doofus in front of the managing director of this company, is we decided to do a commercial. We made a commercial for this. But the problem is, this is where things get funny, is we accidentally used a competitor's packaging in the commercial. So the managing director was so pissed off, but we still got third place because he loved our energy, but he gave us that feedback later. So yeah, it gave us a little bit of confidence.
So the first one went well. You had fun. Sounds like you got some good feedback. At what point did you realize, hey, this is something I'm actually going to excel at or good at?
Right. So it started happening probably a year after. So that was September 2015. And then I realized after that competition that we wanted to try out for the program. So kind of like in a sports draft, there's a similar draft at our school where I just happened to go to. Notice a lot of this is just serendipitous events, Joel. I just happened to go to the world's largest case competition school in the world that is just next to my house. Serendipitous. I do case competitions to mostly get a job. I accidentally get really good at communication coaching, and then I go, "Oh, I could be the greatest coach who ever lived and be the next Dale Carnegie." How did that all like it's all just serendipitous. So anyways, so I'm back to these case competitions. A year later, what happens, and this is one of my bad traits, or it could be a good one, is I'm ultra competitive. So I initially went in to get a job, but then when I started doing them, I grew an obsession about case competition. I probably competed in 50 competitions. I started training all of the best students in our programs to go to Serbia, to go to Singapore, to go to Australia, and go and beat the other students at these competitions. The school pays for everything, by the way. It's pretty wild. And that's how I learned how to speak. Think of me like the Michael Jordan that nobody gives a shit about, in the sense of Michael was so good about basketball in The Last Dance. We saw that documentary. I'm the same way, but in a field that nobody really cares about.
Well, I mean, that's why I wanted to dig into this, because at the end of the day, right? Like we have so much time, everyone has so much time in the day, and what we do with our time literally will dictate where we get to, what we can accomplish, where we get to in health, relationships, finances, family, all that stuff. And when you put time into something over and over and over and over and over, and you learn to love something, you're bound to get better at it. And I'll give you an example. One of the jobs that I had when I was in college, I paid my way through college at working in this frozen foods factory, and it was an hourly job, and you got paid the faster that you worked. And so the more boxes you put to the dock and they're in your freezer suit, it's like 20 degrees in there, the more you got paid. And so like I was in good shape. I was hustling, all this stuff. But like at the end of the day, I could never be first. I can never be first, right? Like I don't know what it was. I was running everybody, and I wanted it. And then at the end of the day, like one of the top guys was gone for a day, and it was like a big holiday, and they gave me all of his orders. And next thing I know, that night, like I was number one in the entire group. I mean, and I'm the people that are in this job are like all adults, right? I'm like 19 years old, just like you're talking about, young. And all of a sudden something clicked. Like I showed up every single day. I wanted it. And the manager that day said the only reason that they gave me that order, because from a pecking order standpoint, I was way low in line. I was, in terms of seniority, there's no reason I should have ever gotten that order. But he said, you know what? Like, I know that you cared. I just wanted to be able to see the look in your face when you were number one, because I know you wanted it. And I was number one. I blew it away. And it's like these little bitty wins in life that come out of nowhere because you put the effort in something that doesn't matter. Stuff that nobody cares about. It's the process, it's the work, it's doing your best, like all these little cliches that when you do it over and over, like it adds up and it matters. And so like I can just imagine, you and your big ass suit from Sears, just kicking ass and taking names and, like outworking everybody and wanting to get more than everybody. And some of that stuff, you can't teach that, but you can learn it. I mean, just to a point to learn to love something. So I wanted to dig into that, just that process. So 9 months in, a year in is when you kind of like it clicked, right?
A year into MasterTalk, a year into case competitions. Great story, by the way, on the frozen food. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, it was the worst job ever. I dreaded it every day. I guess so. The case working, right? So the case working. So a year ends, we're like, oh shit, I got something here.
Absolutely. And side note, I had a really terrible job too before I went to university. I got more lucky there because I landed some great jobs like PwC and stuff. So I did well there. But before then, when I was in college, before uni, it's separated in Canada. I did this really bad job at an eco center. So for those who don't know what an eco center is, it's where people dump the stuff that they can't recycle or put in the trash. So like batteries, a lot of construction workers come to this to dump a lot of the waste from construction sites. So it's a really dusty job, and I had to do dangerous toxics in the back, which means I was sorting out paints, I was sorting out these weird chemicals. You had like a big mask on. I was getting paid $12 an hour to do that job, and I thought that was crazy amounts of money because minimum wage was $10 at the time. So I was like, oh my God, I'm getting paid more than my parents to do this job. This is insane. So I felt really rich back then. But anyways, side note, close. So now going back to the case competition. So at this point, what happened is I'm a year into this case competition program. I started winning a lot. I started losing a lot. And then I became one of the executives in the student run program. So I became the person deciding who gets in the program and who doesn't. And I started coaching the teams myself. And it was a responsibility I took on because I just wanted us to win this specific competition that we never won at. And I thought it was crazy. So that became kind of my North Star. And I had solved the problems I had somewhat around money because I landed a job at PricewaterhouseCoopers that completely changed my life. It was one of my internships. So at this point, I wasn't really thinking about work anymore. I got the job. I was just focused on winning cases. And that's when the idea of coaching other people came, because I realized when we were selecting the students, 20% of them, 25% of them, really sharp kids, but they weren't great speakers. So I just looked at the executive team and I said, how about I just coach them? I don't know how to coach people, but I'm a great speaker. And they just said, yeah, do whatever you want. And then that's how I started gaining coaching experience. And I messed up like 80% of the time.
Fair enough. So that's interesting. So 20% were really sharp, but just, hey, they didn't have that naturally born skill set for speaking for whatever reason. So that journey of okay, I'm going to take my time out of my day to help them. Because then if you help them, then you help the team, right? Get closer to your North Star.
Yes, and let's be very clear on this, because I definitely don't want to be painted as a philanthropist here. Even if I'm doing MasterTalk and I'm helping so many people's lives, and my YouTube channel is this, I just really care about winning. So think about like Michael Jordan. Why does he help his teammates? Why does he push them? Yeah, sure, he wants everybody to win, but he really wants to win more than everyone else on the team combined. Let's make that clear. So it's the same thing for me. So they didn't really have a choice to do the coaching. It was really like, you need to get in line, because they were so smart at the case cracking, like their analysis when they were doing their auditions, is the 3-round interview. They do the case crack, the informal, and if needed, there's another follow-up interview. So it's quite competitive to get into this. So when I was looking at the students, it was literally like, okay, you 15 are terrible. Let's work on this. So I would sit there like Christmas. I missed 3 Christmases, 3 New Year's. Yeah, I never saw my family for 3 years, literally, because the competition was the first week of January. So it's like, there's no way nobody in my class is taking off during the holidays. So I was really intense, right? That's what we won a lot, all the time, I mean. But anyways, the point is that's how I learned how to coach, Joel. And it was that experience that then led into who the person I became today. That's why people who are way older than me trust me with the transformation, because all of that legwork I did when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean the things that you're doing, like, and I'll bring this up now when you were on another podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and talking about the advice and the people that are talking to you and helping you and giving you advice. And you mentioned something that just really hit me. You talked about advice from the future you 10 years from now. What would you tell yourself? And
Let me build on that. Let me build on that. So you brought up the point that I mentioned on JLD's pod, which is a question I got from Jason Skisik. So I don't take credit for that. One of my mentors told me this, which is, Brenden, if your future self, the person who's 10 years older than you, so let's say now I'm 26, so my 36-year-old self, if they had an opportunity to look at our life right now, today, what would they disagree with us on? And I think the challenge, Joel, that most of us miss is you can listen to me, you can listen to you can listen to the people around you. But at the end of the day, all of us are unique as human beings with a unique set of experiences. So, for example, one of the advices I give people as an analogy is live with your mother. Even today, I still live with my mom. It's just not for financial reasons anymore, because obviously I do better now than I used to. But the reason is to spend more time with her. But all my C levels all know that. They know I live with my mother. They don't care because I'm better than most of the coaches in the industry. But the reason I bring that out is I tell any young person who cares about freedom and independence, you should live with your parents, double down on your cash flow so you have more leverage to do whatever you want to do. That's why I have a massive media budget for MasterTalk and all that stuff. It ain't cheap. But that doesn't apply to 20% of people listening, because they go, oh, I have a toxic dad, I have a toxic parent. Didn't apply to me. I had a toxic dad, but not a toxic mom, so it worked out fine. But then the advice for the person listening is, okay, find friends, go room with them. And then some people go, well, I'm an introvert. It's like, okay, then find more ways to increase your earning potential. So notice how that same advice can be misunderstood really quickly. So the point that I'm driving with the advice we were talking about earlier is the only person who has the right answer is you. So what you do is you listen to different perspectives and you go, what does 32-year-old Brenden think? So when I was 21, it was, hey, you're suffering right now, but if you play your cards right, you're going to be a partner at PwC. You're going to be a partner at this company. But then 36-year-old Brenden, right, Joel, was like, holy shit, you'd be an idiot to work at a company. MasterTalk is such a massive opportunity. You could change the world. Why are you spending an hour in a meeting at a company? Just make them your client. Just build a relationship and make IBM your client, which is what happened. And just do that instead. And you could change the world in a massive way. And now when in 2 years, my 30-year-old self will tell me something different. But I think the lesson is the only person who has the right answer is you. So you got to listen to your own intuition.
I love it. I love it. I mean, there's so many people that have voices that they want to tell you what to do. They want to tell, and not always ask questions. When you ask questions, it may be the same information, but the order of operations is different. You're going to have a different effect from an emotional standpoint. But yeah, I love that. I mean, and that was kind of the thing when I'm thinking about, my 19-year-old self and, or anybody else that's 19 or 20. It's like, well, what would I have told myself then? It's like, well, shit, no matter what I told myself, would I listen? Would I actually do the work? Because, one of the things that I've seen on this podcast and obviously in myself is that, like, some of the reasons why I do things, some of the reasons that push me out of my comfort zone have to do with pain, struggle, and hurdles you overcome. And, someone may be telling me, hey, you need to be doing this. But it's like, if I haven't come to that conclusion on my own or dealt with certain things that got me there on my own, I'm not going to do it because I don't have the incentive to do it. And so, like, you're talking about you being the Michael Jordan in the making in your world in that competition part. I mean, when you were busting your tail, trying to get that North Star, did you know what you were doing? Did you know that you were planting seeds for the future self in the moment?
No way, Joel. Because my only focus was following the next decision, which is at some point I was like, I need a job. But then when I landed Price, my whole life changed. Because at that point I was like, oh my God, like I don't need to have a network to get a job like this. I just need to be good. Like I was like, perfect. And I built it, right? I cold emailed partners and they wanted to talk to the 19-year-old kid who in the world in their first year of university is messaging you. Like, I need to talk to this guy. And that's how I landed Price, essentially. But then after that, I just focused on what was the most interesting thing to me next, which was winning competitions. I loved case competitions because even if there was a lot of work, and there is a lot of work today, and there'll always be a lot of work because that's just how I want to live my life in the same way you want to live yours, right? So I was sleeping 4 or 5 hours a day, which I don't recommend to anyone. I sleep 8, 9 hours now, but back then I was a savage, like I was crazy. But the punchline, Joel, is I loved every second of it. Like I loved staying up until 2 a.m. and it was New Year's Eve and the guy in the same room was wishing me Happy New Year and I was telling him to get back to work and focus on what he's doing. I was going to lose next week. Like I just loved that person of who I was. But to your point, I never expected it to turn to a business. Like if you had talked to that version, that person was on the podcast. This is literally what we've told you. Hey Joel, so I just got a job in accounting. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a job in consulting, level up my earning potential, which ended up happening at IBM. Got a job there because a lot of case competitors they do that, or they do investment banking. Those are the two kind of best jobs you can get out of business school. And in 10 years, I'll be a partner at this firm. I'll do $500,000 a year, get married, have kids, and enjoy the high life and retire my mom. That was literally what I would have told you. Not about saving the world, not about helping people. I didn't really care about that stuff. I just cared about the people in my programs and them winning competitions. But then when I was 22, I was in my last semester of college, uni, either way. And I was starting at IBM in 4 months, 6-figure starting salary, pretty close enough. And I was like, wow, finally, my life is set. And one guy asked me the most important question I got asked in my life that completely changed the trajectory of it. And it was one of the people I coached, Joe. And we're sitting and it's mid-December. This is December 2018. And he just looked at me and he said, how did you learn how to speak? And I just went, what do you mean? In a very aggressive way, like, what do you mean? How did I learn how to speak? And he said, well, did you do Toastmasters? Did you hire a coach? Did you watch YouTube videos? I was like, nah, dude, I just coached a bunch of people. And that was the seed that planted MasterTalk.
Damn.
Yeah.
Damn. So then IBM. So you went
Yep.
through with IBM, right? And then what?
Correct. So then what happened is after that seed got planted, I went back home. And for the first time in my life, I looked up public speaking tips on a YouTube channel. I didn't even know that existed. Right? So this is like December 2018. But I started working at IBM April 2019, so 4 months later. So I started watching videos from people who are now my colleagues and friends, but at the time they were my enemies, right? Because I was driven by a lot of anger and and competitive energy. They're all amazing people. But at the time when I was watching their videos, in my head I was like, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. Like they have clearly not coached anyone in their life because I found holes in all their videos. So I was so naive, and I guess I had a big ego that I just said, I'm just going to be the one to do it. So at this point, what's happening? April, I start working at IBM, and every week I'm just posting a video. I called it MasterTalk because my friend had the idea for the name. The logo came from another friend. He just said, you need a logo. And I was like, I got 20 subscribers. Why do I need a logo? He was like, let me put a logo. So he made me one. And every week I posted a video, and I started making money at IBM. And then I heard about Lewis's event. Lewis is like one of my big heroes. He's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. And I've been listening since I was 20 years old. So he was kind of like my teacher in personal development. When I didn't have any money, I couldn't afford coaches like I do now. And I wanted to meet him. So that's why I went to Columbus to go to this event. And that's when everything changed. I went there, I met Vamsi, who's the CEO of Make More Leaders, and he's the guy who was like, you could charge executives $3,000 to work with you. And I was like, $3,000? I never charged anyone anything for coaching. And he gave me my first couple of clients. That's when everything changed. I knew I had a business at this point. I knew I had an opportunity. And then I had to make the hardest decision of my life in June of 2021. So it's pretty recently. This is not too long ago, almost 2 years ago now, of quitting my 6-figure job to do MasterTalk full time. And that's what I did.
Damn.
Yeah.
So for the listener out there, hearing this journey, like at the end of the day, like my own self, right? Like I'm trying to do a job. I'm trying to, do a podcast, build a platform to help the next person, somehow figure out a way to be able to save money and build wealth. And, I had to figure out some way to be able to get outside of myself. I have kids. I do my job. I get home, dinner, bath, nighttime. I'm done by 8:30, and I'm like, I got all this stuff to do. I got big goals and all this stuff to do. The last thing I want to do is log back into my computer and get more things done at 8:30 at night. And I came across a book from a friend called Atomic Habits, and I've been reading it, as part of my morning routine. And he talks about the 2-minute rule. And, 2 minutes, like if you want to build a habit, you got to do it every single day for a period of time, 2 weeks, a month. There's all kinds of studies that say how long it needs to be, whatever it is. But if you miss a day, you got to start over. And so he talks about the 2-minute rule. All you got to do is 2 minutes. Like, just get to your computer, log in, 2 minutes. And so that this one day in June, I was like, shit, I'm gonna try this out. I'm gonna do 2 minutes, and I'm gonna turn off my computer. I'm gonna go walk and go watch a TV show. And then fast forward the clock, I did that, a few more days, and this isn't that hard to log in. And after 2 weeks, I was looking forward to logging in. That stress and anxiety was gone. So I had to train my brain to want to do this, to train my brain to want to learn to love it. And so, like, even though you have this natural passion and competitiveness, like Michael Jordan in your field, like, you sometimes, like, either you're born with it or not, but doesn't mean you can't train yourself to get close. And so, for the listener out there, it's like, hey, like, when I hear your story, Brenden, I'm like, this guy's a badass. Like, he's just going out there, kicking people's asses and taking names and, like, gonna go do stuff and help people. And, the whole story of, the practice, you were practicing, you were coaching, and all in the while, for years, you just all of a sudden, like, you realize, hey, I can go train C-suite executives and charge a lot of money. Like, you just built the skill set out of, like, just luck or coincidences, but, like, just boom, it happened. And, like, the people that aren't where they want to be, it's like, what you need to do to be happy and successful, but you just don't do it, or don't do it enough. And so doing the practice, doing the boring stuff, like, that's the hard part. When you get a week or 2 weeks into building a habit, and things get boring, right? You're not seeing the results. The results are not there. Well, they're there, but they're not visible to the naked eye. They're infinitely small, as you're talking about power compounding. So I just think it's so interesting, hearing these stories, like yourself, of doing all that work, all that practice, all that stuff that nobody wants to do, but you love to do it, and it turns into something just massive. I want to go back to that 20% person, right? Who they're sharp, they got it, but they're just not good at speaking. What was the one thing that, with your coaching process or strategy, for backwards in time, that person in university, that you're able to do to help that person get out of their comfort zone and be better at that part of the process?
For sure, Joel. So the answer for that is very different, I guess, for the general public today, but I'll answer for that specific one. The reason it wasn't so hard to get them results back then was because they had a really deep why. Because all of them didn't want to look like fools at the competition. So they really were listening to every little word that I was sharing. But to get them to master, which is not the advice I would share to the general public, we can cover that too if you want, is how cases work. You have intros, conclusions, and the middle part, right? The analysis, the financials. So what I would force a lot of these students to do is to represent the intro 10 times. So the first time they would do an intro, they'd go, "Hi everyone, my name is Isabella, and this is John, and this is," and I would say, "Do it again. Hi, my name is Isa. Do it again. Do it again, Isa. Do it again, Josh. Do it again." I'm just throwing random names here. So when they do that intro over and over again, and I'm like sitting there for an hour, do it again, do it again, do it again. But then after 60 minutes, they're like, superstars. And then all I do is I just record them and I just show them to them. It's like, "Do you recognize the person on this phone?" And they go, "No." And I was like, "That's who you are now. And that's who you're going to be at the competition." So it's a lot more aggressive in the approach. So it's really intense practice. For the general public, I obviously don't recommend that, Joe. So what I'd recommend is, let's apply that 2-minute rule to something easy. I like that a lot, actually. And I didn't know that. Having been someone who follows James Clear, should probably know that, but thanks for that. So how do we apply the 2-minute rule for communication? Here's my 2-minute communication rule. Practice the random word exercise once a day. Okay, random word exercise is just, you pick a word like light bulb, ceiling, wife, a phone, trophy case, and create random presentations out of thin air. Do that once a day. Pick one word a day. And if you do that for 30 days, you'll have done the random word exercise more times than most people, and you'll also be infinitely better at it, and it helps you think on your feet and deal with uncertainty.
Okay, so I'm clearly not very smart because when you say a word exercise and present it, I don't understand what that means.
Perfect. No worries, Joel. And it's totally fine. That happens a lot. So let's do it this way. Joel, I want you to give me any word you want, and I will demonstrate the exercise.
Oh, okay. Uh, inflation.
Inflation. So Joel did not give me the word inflation prior to this conversation, team. And I have
Nope.
to literally riff a presentation right now, which I'll do. I was looking at the news the other day, something I don't recommend you do, Joel, or really anyone else listening, because it's fairly negative. And the main theme of 2022 was interest rates and inflation. Inflation, inflation, inflation. Because the Fed printed so much money, especially the United States, inflation rates rose to historical highs. We're talking 7, 8, 9, 10%, when the average was 2 to 3%. So, how do we combat inflation? And so many people give us ideas. Some people in the world, they complain about it. They go, oh my God, what am I going to do? And they just sit there and yell all day. And there's other people in the world who go, how do I make the most out of this situation? Because the answer is always to increase your earning power. Because if you're able to increase your earning power, invest in the right assets, you're going to be able to combat inflation. But this is not a course about finances, Joel. It's a life lesson. And life lesson is it doesn't matter whether it's the Pope, whether it's inflation, whether it's interest rates, whether it's getting divorced, whether it's a bad financial situation. Life will always throw obstacles at you, but the only thing that you can control is how you respond to them. So now the question for all of you today is how will you respond to the obstacles in your life? Because the way you respond will dictate the quality of your life. That's it. Random word exercise.
Okay. I'm ready to go learn a new skill. I'm ready to go get my side hustle going. I'm ready to learn. Shit. I love it. Damn. No, seriously, like that was just, hey, I was talking to another person about tax stuff, and his name is Jeff Badu. He'll be on the podcast again, talking about flat tax, talking about inflation. So we were just talking about that like an hour ago. So that there was no connection there. You just totally killed that. Jesus Christ.
But the
Okay.
point I want to drive, though, Joel, is one, people shouldn't compare themselves to me because I've done the exercise and I want people to hear this 3,000 times. Not 3 times, not 30 times, not 300 times. I've done this thing 3,000 times, right? At least. And I'm being pessimistic with the number here. I'm being conservative. So what does that mean for those of you listening to this? The first 100 times you do the random word exercise, you should not keep score on how well you do it. You should keep score on how many times you do it. So at the beginning, it's inflation is a tool. It's how we measure, right? So you don't really know how to do it, but over time, you start to have fun with it. Like I was just having fun with inflation. So you just got to riff and you just got to keep doing it. But the key is if you do it 5 times a day, which only takes 5 minutes, for a year, you'll have done it 1,800 times. Just most people aren't willing to put in the legwork. That's it.
Holy crap. Okay. So what if it's something you have no knowledge about at all? What do you do with that in that
You
situation?
just riff. I'm not an inflation expert. You know that. I just took what I heard of the news yesterday and created a presentation. If you don't have the knowledge, make something up. So if inflation, you don't have to talk about, you have to even know what that means. You could literally go, yeah, inflation is really tough on people. There's so many families in the United States who struggle with paying their next bill. So you're not even talking about inflation. I think the goal is, are you able to improvise a speech? Nobody's judging you. But the reason this is so important, Joel, is because life is filled with uncertainty. Let's say when you meet somebody new, like on the street or at a party, you have no idea how that conversation was going to go. Life is built on uncertainty. So you need to know how to deal with it. The random word exercise is just the harder version of that. That's all.
So you mentioned something at the end there about, hey, having a set of circumstances, and it's really literally like your result will be how you deal with it, how you act on it from there. You can't change the result, the fact. You can change the way you react to it. How did you incorporate that mindset into your life, and how long have you been kind of bringing that mindset into your daily practice?
For sure, Drew. Here's an easy way I like to think about this. Every single day or every single week, cut something bad out of your life. I don't think life is all about adding things. Like the random word exercise, you should add it in your life. But most of the things we need to do in life is to remove things. So, for example, let's think about it. What percentage of this audience drinks beer? It's probably not 0%. Cut that out of your life, right? The next day, it's Coca-Cola. What percentage of people drink soft drinks? Not to call them out specifically, but soft drinks, right? It's probably more than 0%. I have never been drunk once in my life, Joel. Not once. Never smoked a joint once in my life. Never smoked a cigarette once in my life. And some people could argue I'm not having enough fun. I'm not enjoying life's delicacies. But I think my version of that is when we do what the 99% are doing, we will get the same results that 99% of people are getting, which is average, which means you'll be obese, you'll make the wrong health decisions, you'll make an average amount of money of like $40,000, $50,000 a year. You don't want to be average. You want to be abnormal, which means you need to make abnormal decisions. So that's what I did. Every day I would cut, and it doesn't have to be something serious like a negative friend. Literally what I did is I cut out breakfast. I don't eat breakfast anymore. I cut out tea the other day. 3 months ago, I used to drink 4 cups of black tea a day. 4 to 5. Actually, before 12, I would already have 4 or 5 cups. Now I just drink hot water. There's no more coffee. There's no more caffeine in my diet. And then instead of having breakfast, what I do is I have lunch, and then I just put an avocado in my mouth, and I eat an avocado every day. And I hate avocados, but I know it's healthy for me. So it's just removing something. But if you do that for so many years, you have a pretty optimized schedule. And that's what I just recommend people think about.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, by cutting out breakfast, did you know what you were doing in terms of like, what do they call it? Intermittent fasting?
Intermittent fasting, yeah. So
Yeah.
we have a joke in my community, which is when you're young, it's called you don't have money for breakfast because we literally couldn't afford breakfast, and when you're older, it's called intermittent fasting. So I'll take it.
Awesome. So what does a day in your life look like right now with your schedule and your clientele and all the things that you're involved in right now?
For sure, Joel. So I call them my 3 C's: coaching, conversations, content creation. So most of my time is spent in these 3 C's. I'm either coaching clients directly, like I did today. I'm either in direct conversations. This could be an informal intro. This could be a podcast like we're doing now, a conversation, or I'm creating content for my YouTube channel for different social platforms. So I'm either doing one of these 3 C's, and that's how I primarily spend my time these days.
So your YouTube channel, just for example, starting at the back end, you've got 30,000 subscribers, which is pretty awesome. The clientele that we have on this channel, we're talking about side hustles and building additional revenue streams, income streams, and social media is a big example of that. In terms of generating income on YouTube, because you have to fit into certain buckets in terms of watch time and subscribers, and I think it's 1,000 subscribers and 10,000 watch hours. I forget what it is. For you, I mean, in terms of generating income, where at in your journey did that happen for you?
And to be quite transparent, Joel, I lose a shit ton of money on my channel. So for those of you who think you can make money on YouTube, forget about it. I make $200 a month on ads, and I spend $1,000 a month on production. So I actually lose a ton of money on my channel. But the reason I've made so much money off of YouTube, or at least more than I've spent on production, I've probably spent 30, 40K total since the channel's inception, is because I get clients from my YouTube channel. Coaching clients is what pays the bills, not people watching my videos. That's really a passion thing, like a mission. Because funny enough, most of my clients come from LinkedIn, which actually makes sense since most executives and professionals are there. Then YouTube. YouTube is really my give back to society, right? I want that information to exist because I didn't have that growing up, and I know the next Elon won't have access to that either. That's why I'm creating that free access for the world. But in terms of how to monetize, you should always be selling a product or service in the back end of your socials. So here's an easy way to think about it that I got from Jason Capital. And a lot of people say this: if you want to make $1 million a year or just find success in the quickest possible way, even making 100 grand a year is magic too. Nothing wrong with that, which is one product, one distribution channel, right? One product, one distribution channel. That's it. That's all you need. Right? So, and with at one price point. But I think the key is When you're focused on one single product, whether it's a product or it's a service, you can make it the best possible thing, and then it's easier for you to get clients or to get people into the funnel. All the money I've made this year, 95% of the income only came from one product, right? So when you're doing that and you're refining it, then you bring all your social media, your channels to that one thing, and that's how we get sales in our business.
I love it. I love it. I mean, there's a lot of people on Twitter that I follow, and the whole solopreneur, movement with people just building their followings, building their newsletters. There's a guy by the name of Justin Welsh, and literally they're just talking about one thing over and over and over and over, and just talking about it from a different angle, different viewpoint, different subject matter within this fine-tuned niche. And it's just getting further into that rabbit hole just really kind of changed the way I look at all this stuff, because I just didn't understand how all this stuff worked. It's about surface area. It's about, specialization in something, and a million other things. But I love the way that you explain it. So Jason Capital, can you explain who he is real quick?
Yeah, Jason Capital is just an online marketer. So he's probably sold like tens of millions of dollars online through ads and paid traffic and just acquisition methods on social. He's coined the term social funnels. He has a really strong social funnel where you can get clients off Instagram and different clients, stuff like that, through chat sequences that I use in my business. But I think the main idea here, to keep it simple, is first of all, I don't recommend most people be business owners. I think the main priority people should have is to have a high paying job. I call this side hustling comfortably, simply because the probability of one becoming successful in business is actually really slim. So I'd rather somebody get a high paying job, make a good amount of money, and know how to leverage that capital, which brings me to number two. The second piece of advice is leverage your capital. And that doesn't mean go into real estate, doesn't mean you need to invest in 10 different vehicles. That just means you need to create a life where the ratio of how much you make versus how much you spend is massive. So how much you spend should be far lower than how much you make. And you don't need to make a lot of money. So the reason I was able to stack a lot of income that I then used when I went into MasterTalk full time, I had like a 9-month emergency fund or something, was because I lived at home. So if me, I call this income combining. If me, my sister, and my mom are under the same roof, we all have the same internet bill, the same mortgage, your cost per person is like ridiculous. So if you're making $5,000 a month at a regular job, you're keeping like three, right? So that's the second part. And I was really serious about this, which means I don't have a dog because it costs me more money. Like I literally every line item. Like I don't drink Coke because it's like a waste of money. I'd rather just drink water. I have one less meal a day. Like I do all of those things. And then the third piece, which is now let's talk about the business. Now let's talk about the opportunity. And the reason I'm so big on this, Joel, because a lot of people say, experts in the finances, they go, focus on increasing your earning potential, not just cutting out the lattes. I actually really disagree with that advice, because if you can't cut corners in your budget, you're not going to do that in your business. If you're not religious about how you spend, how you make money, and how you invest capital in your personal life, you will bring those bad habits into the business. You'll buy shit you don't need. You'll invest in consultants you don't need. You'll make the same mistakes in the business. Right? So when we go into the business now, assuming you have a great job, then what I want you to do is I want you to try 10 different businesses, 10 different ideas on somebody else's dime. That's what I did at IBM. I tried a bunch of different coaching businesses, life coaching, career coaching, and I made money. But communication coaching was the thing that I felt that was like 100 times better than anyone else in the market, because I had such an unfair advantage, because I had so much coaching experience relative to my age, which was insane. I'm like going on 8 years of experience at like 19, which is like when I started at 19. It's like crazy. So the point is, when you find that unfair advantage, then prove the unfair advantage by making some money. And when you have enough, then quit your job. That's my framework and how I approach it.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I mean, not everybody obviously will have the ability to move in with people, family, friends, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I did the same thing. I didn't move out of my parents' house until I was like 25, 26. I forget what, and bought a house thereafter and was making decent money, whatever. It wasn't comfortable, in the dating scene to say, hey, I was, can I go back to your place? No, it's not a good idea. My mom might be up. But it was something that I was okay with, because I knew what I wanted to be able to get to. I knew I was trying to go with finances and whatnot. So that that C-level executive, right? Like here you are, this 23-year-old, 22-year-old, kid talking to us, these executives that are twice your age, or if not more. How was that dynamic in terms of just being able to engage and then pass on the information and get traction with the process?
For sure, Joel. And I'll be honest, it was really hard at the beginning for sure. So here's a couple of perspectives I'll add, especially for those who are younger. Start with the person you're comfortable serving. Because it's cool, right? On my resume, I was coaching a super high level executive today, right? That to the point that I had imposter syndrome. Like I was like, holy shit, why is she trusting me with the work? So we all have those moments in our life. So the advice I would share is you need to start with the people you're ready for. So for me, it was students in college. That's where I started. Then how did I get C-level experience so quickly? The answer is actually really obvious if you think about it, Joel, which is I coached my friends who were CEOs. How does that make sense? A lot of my friends are tech CEOs, right? Because obviously a lot of people start startups, they're young. So, and they can't afford a coach either because they're just getting started. So all of them came to me and they said, well, Brenden, I'm trying to raise venture capital, but I have no idea what's happening. And I had some venture capital experience because I was a part of a fund when I was in college. So I just taught them what I knew. And they were like, hey, this worked, man. And they would start giving me insight. This is how we're thinking about it at C-level. So when I was doing that, I just said, oh, wait a second. I can coach people in their 30s who are managers. Because if that guy's a CEO and he's 23, I could probably coach a manager who's 30, right? That's what I did. Then I coached the manager. And then after I coached the manager, I was like, well, I could probably coach somebody in their 40s who's also a manager, right? And then I just kept doing that. And that iteration cycle ended up with now I coach, like 50-year-old high-level execs. But it didn't start there. It started at the beginning. And I always need to be the smartest person in the room, right? So there's two parts to that. Be the dumbest person in the room so you can learn, but with your clients, be the smartest person. So I think the key is really about saying, my clients know more about me than most areas of life. Experience, how to parent more, how to run their companies, but I'm not teaching them that. The specific lane that they don't know is the lane that I know, which is how to speak. So that's the way I would think about it.
So some of these CEOs, execs, you're going to present them your skill set, help them transform. And if you're a CEO, right, like you've gotten there for a reason. And obviously there's different sizes of companies and track records and whatever. So what are some of the things that you're helping them to be able to accomplish at that point in their careers?
Great question, Joel. So there's a couple of points there. So let me start with how I built the book at the beginning, which I think will be fascinating for your audience to hear. All I did was a principle I teach called show, don't tell. So don't tell people what you do, show them what you do. So what I did is I went up to CEOs that I wanted to work with, and I just said, I'll coach you for free. Give me an hour. And most of them would say no. But one guy in particular, let's say, was really struggling. So even if he's a C-level, he got there on brain power, not speaking power. So CFOs are a great example of that. Those were some of my earlier clients where they were really good at the numbers, but then they got to their executive position. They're like, holy shit, I got to talk to the board now. I don't know what to do. So I know that sounds crazy, but that's actually what happens. And the reason he took a chance on me at the time, that the person I'm thinking of in my mind, let's call him, I don't know, John, is because he had tried other communication coaches in the past and they all didn't get him the result. And he said, well, if you're going to coach me for free for an hour, I might as well take you up on it. And so I did. And so after I got him the result, he was like, okay, you're actually good. Now I'll pay you. And then that slowly built my book. But what's great about the field I'm in, which I got lucky with, communication coaching, it's really easy for people to see results. So when he started speaking, everyone was like, what happened to you? Oh, you got to hire Brenden. Brendan's the guy. They're like, who's Brenden? This kid? Really? He's like, yeah, I swear by him. I'll pay for you if I need to. And now like 70% of my business is word of mouth. So that's what happened. And then in terms of the problems we're solving for them, it's never like they can't speak. It's always they can always do better. So let's say they're presenting, they're saying a lot of ums and ahs. Their facial expression is off. Their vocal tone variety isn't there. So I push them to think about, if we fix this, you're going to 10x the growth of your business. You're going to get more sales, and that's what gets them the result.
Okay. So I'm going to put myself on a limb here. So in 1 minute, what would you advise me? So listeners can see kind of what's out there in terms of things that you would advise them. in 1 minute, we're going to keep it at 1 minute because I don't want to be torn apart here. What advice would you give to me as a podcast person in this world that and I'm still a rookie? What advice would you give to me?
For sure, Joel. I usually don't pay attention to that too much when I'm being interviewed, or because
Ooh.
if I have that mode on all the time, then it becomes painful for me to listen and give feedback. If I had to give a few thoughts, I would say the first thing that you could do better, more in the process, is you could send an email to every guest you have in the future and say, "How do I make this the best interview you have in your life?" And what you're doing is you don't care about the answer to the question. You're conditioning the guest's mind to think, hey, this is going to be a really important interview. He probably did a lot of homework on me if he's asking me, how can I make this the best interview of my life? So I'm going to show up with a different energy. So this is called the pre-show is the show. That's the one piece. I think the other piece is just smile a little bit more. I think the questions you're asking are really good, so it's tough there. And your vocal tones are a little too stable. So you say like this a lot, but you don't do this enough. You don't do enough
Okay.
highs. And I'll stop the feedback there. So those are a couple points to
Sweet.
work on.
Sweet. Okay. I'll have to watch the tape and work on it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So going back to the, finding that gap of trying to be able to maximize your savings, structuring your lifestyle, living with your parents, that by default it means you're not paying rent and by default saving money. That's one of the things that we talk about a lot too. And, hey, if somebody has a side hustle and you're not saving money right now, like at some point you're going to burn out and it's not going to be sustainable. So you've got to be able to find a way to be able to get some wins and structuring your life to be able to live off of your main job and then let your savings go directly. I'm sorry, the side hustle go directly into savings. And so with that in mind, if you were giving advice to that young person and trying to build skills, what are some of the things that you would advise them to do to find their passion? Because you mentioned before, you don't believe in passions, right? Like in terms of advising them to go find that next thing, what kind of advice would you give for that?
For sure, Joel. So one thing I want to emphasize with the whole parent thing, that I think a lot of young people don't do that conversation well. It's not about not paying rent. It's more about saying, how do we play team as a family? So for me, what that looked like is I paid most of the bills. It's just the rationale I gave my sister and my mom is if we just live together and we split all the income, this is where our financial situation will be in 5 years, and we'll all be millionaires. Because if you just do this and you put this in an S&P 500, and if you look at the growth rate, you just keep it there, like, okay, maybe not 5 years, but definitely in 15, like you'll get there. Even if my sister isn't going to make a lot of money, she's going to be like a high school teacher, right? So when you got to sell it that way, so you got to bring more maturity to those conversations. You don't just go, "Oh my God, like I'm rent free now." Like bring more maturity, show the game plan to your parents, so that way they see that maturity and they go, "We're going to follow the decisions you're making because you're making sense here," or else you're going to get into arguments that are unnecessary. So that's the point I wanted to add there as a caveat. In terms of how to find your passion, it's a complex thing, right? So here's the best explanation I have so far, but I'll get better over time. So bear with me. So it's by Gay Hendricks. Gay Hendricks wrote a book called The Genius. So the genius zone is essentially different areas of life that you're good at or terrible at. So let me give you an example that he uses. The zone of competence, the zone of incompetence, the zone of genius, and the zone of excellence. So let's go through all of this individually. The zone of incompetence. This is something you really shouldn't be doing with your life. Example for Brenden, plumbing, being an electrician, being a priest, being a garbage. I mean, I could do this for 7 hours. Yeah, Brenden shouldn't be doing this. He's not good at this. Done. The zone of competence. The zone of competence is if we spend time in this, we'll get good, but not enough to make an impact. So, basketball player. Yeah, if I spent 5 hours a day playing basketball, man, I could probably beat you in basketball, Joel. But, or maybe I couldn't. Who knows? Depends how much you play
I
basketball.
can shoot from really far away. That's my
Okay,
that's
so
all I can do. That's all I can do.
So let's do 7 hours. Let's say I practice 7 hours a day for a month. Maybe I could be better than you. But I ain't getting drafted to the NBA. I'm not making more money doing this. It's not leading to anywhere. But it's more of a habit, a hobby. So that's what it is. The zone of excellence. The zone of excellence is a combination of two things. What does the world need me to do? Oh, no, sorry. What am I really, really good at? And what does the world need me to do that I can get paid money for? So an example of this that I had in my life is being an accountant, being a technology consultant. I'm really good at it and I can get paid a lot of money. So if I'm in a class of 30 people, with 30 of my classmates, I could be top 3 in the class, which is good enough to get a job and make a 6-figure income. This is what we call the zone of excellence. The last one, which is the area all of us are trying to shoot for, but we're going there too quickly, is the zone of genius, which is the combination of 3 things. Something we're really, really good at, something that the world needs and is willing to pay us money for, and something that we really enjoy doing. But the problem with the zone of genius, it is very difficult to optimize for that zone. Like for me, if you had told me at 12 years old that I needed to be a communication coach, I'd have been like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? I'm not passionate about that. I don't care about that. Like, I never would have found my zone of genius if I sat there and I just prayed to God for my zone of genius. So my advice going under this framework, Joel, is to start with your zone of excellence, meaning find something that you're really, really good at that you can get paid money to do in a guaranteed way, even if you're not happy doing it. And I know that's controversial saying that, and I'll tell you why. Here's the reality, Joel, that you know really well, we just don't talk about it enough publicly, which is even if you're doing something you love, you still have to spend 20% of your time doing something you don't like. Like, you think I love every sales call I'm on with an executive? No. A lot of these executives are uptight. Do you think I loved making my YouTube videos at the beginning? Of course not. I was alone in my basement. I hated them until I had the money to hire somebody. Now I love it. There's always going to be a percentage of time, even in our zone of genius, even in something we love, that we just won't enjoy. So the advice, the tough love, is get used to it. Get used to doing work you don't enjoy. And why not do work you get paid a lot of money to do that you don't enjoy versus doing work that you don't enjoy and you get paid like shit for? So that's why zone of excellence is the key. And then the last step is when you find your zone of excellence, and it might be an entertainment lawyer. It might be a plumber. I got a cousin of mine who's a nuclear engineer, and he gets paid $100,000 to just be at a power plant all day and do nothing. It's amazing. And then with that money, then find your zone of genius. That's my advice.
I love it. I love it. We're running short on time here. It's been amazing spending time with you. I guess there's one more thing I want to ask you. I've asked everybody right this week on the show. This is out of left field. So back to the inflation question, the housing market. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to buy a house right now?
Take my advice with a grain of salt. Please take it with a grain of salt.
This is your second one-word challenge for the
day. Yeah. Here's my advice, Joel. My advice is, why do we need to buy a home? What's the goal? What's the goal of the home? So my perspective has always been, and I'll tell you mine. I don't plan on moving out of my mother's house until I'm married. So to your point, I'm not too focused on dating in my mid-20s. Here's literally the strategy, and I don't know what's going to happen, so you'll have to interview me in 5 years to see how it goes. Which is, okay, focus on the business. Sure, I'll date a few girls here and there, but really only lock in the girl who understands what the long-term plan of what I'm trying to do is. Because somebody who's afraid of the fact that I live with my mother, even if I pay 90% of the bills, by the way, is not somebody I want to be married to anyways and have children with. Okay. So my focus is, I'm not going to buy a home. I don't care if the interest rate is 1% or 10%. I did lock a fixed rate on our mortgage at 2%, which was a killer.
Yeah, never going to see it again.
Never going to see it again, right? So unfortunately, we can only do 5-year fix in Canada, so I couldn't do a 10-year. But fair enough. It's okay. By the time we have to renew it, it'll be 2025, 2026, and I expect interest rates to not be 7%, hopefully. So anyways, it's fine. So my perspective is, I don't like real estate personally, not because it's a bad asset. There's a lot of people make their money in real estate like you have. I just don't like the burden of renters. So my strategy is just leverage the excess cash, put it in an S&P, and put the rest in my business. That's it. So I won't buy a house until I'm like 33, 35, when I'm doing like $1 million a year in my business, when I'm like 17 years into this business and I'm still the youngest coach in the industry in 17. Right. So that's my strategy, but that's what works for me, right? So for somebody like one of my buddies, right? He's really good at wholesaling. He makes $2 million a year flipping properties in Seattle. That's his thing. He's really, really good at real estate. He was my first ever client. I was charging like $100 an hour. I didn't know what I was doing. So that guy, it makes sense. But I think the key is you got to figure out what works for you. But I think in general, if you're trying to build your dream and you have an opportunity to live somewhere else and you don't need the house, I would not take on that liability. That's my personal thought.
Cool. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, everybody's situation is different, and
Yeah.
where they're trying to go is going to be different. But I love that insight and love the logic. Um, Last thing, any other advice that you would want to give to an aspiring entrepreneur that's trying to get out of the rat race, trying to build their business and build something for themselves?
I would say the advice that remains is be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, you probably want to do something important with your life, which means the people who are doing something important, the people who are doing cool things, are often insane. Don't you find it odd, Joel, that a kid started a YouTube channel, not on, pranks or music or anything else that people do for fun on YouTube, but on executive communication tips. Then he went on to coach those executives for money. He built a pretty good practice that makes more money than his old job and coaches all these CEOs, yet he still lives in his mother's basement. He's telling you not to buy a dog to save money. He's scared to drive but owns a car. It's just his sister drives it for him because he's too scared out of his wits to drive out of fear of being in an accident. And he's in the top 1% of all listeners in the world on Spotify for Justin Bieber. And he dances alone in that basement an hour a day, and he karaoke's in 8 different languages. How does any of this make any sense, Joel? That, my friend, is the point. When everything in your life makes sense to the only person that it should, which is you, you're probably making the right decisions in your life. So be insane or be the same would be the final thought.
Damn. Be insane or be the same. Okay. I like it. Okay. In 6 months, in 1 year, what's the next goal that you have? Where do you see yourself wanting to get to next?
Yeah, the way I think about it is, for me, 2022 is the year of survival, to be transparent. I didn't know if I could build a practice that would replace my income. So I was guns ho, trying 15 different acquisition strategies, jumping up from plane to plane. Thankfully, the plane landed for me, and I did much better in 2022 than I ever did in my corporate career. So knock on wood, the hard work paid off. So I think 2023 for me is the year of thriving and scaling. So now, how do I take something that I have a clear system for that's getting me consistent results for my clients and for my bottom line, and how do I scale that in a way that gets me the opportunity? And this is going to be my first recession that I'm playing in. So we have a lot of dry powder on the side here so we can spend on advertising and really come out of this recession a lot more wealthier and create a lot more impact for generations to come. That's the game this year.
Awesome. Brenden, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day with us, and hopefully have you on down the road and celebrating some more wins. And we'll talk soon.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Brenden. Take care.
Yeah, you too, Joe.
Bye.